You learn to read a city by its rhythms. The way traffic sounds at 7 in the morning versus 7 at night. The faces that become familiar at the coffee shop, the grocery store, the pharmacy. Toronto was like that for me, a place of patterns and routines, especially in the neighborhood where I'd lived for 32 years. I was 64 years old, retired from teaching high school mathematics for nearly 4 decades. My wife, Catherine, had passed away 6 years earlier, and since then, my world had shrunk to a comfortable size. Morning walks, afternoon chess at the community center, evening books by the fireplace, a predictable life, which after decades of grading papers and managing teenagers, felt like exactly what I needed. It was a Tuesday in late November when everything changed. The kind of gray afternoon where the cold hasn't quite committed to being winter yet. I'd stopped at the Metro on Bloor Street for my usual supplies, bread, milk, the ginger tea I'd become fond of since Catherine died. She'd always made fun of my practical shopping lists, said I bought food like I was solving an equation. Protein, vegetables, grains, fruit. No joy, she'd say. No spontaneity. The woman ahead of me at checkout was counting change onto the counter. Her hands shook as she separated loonies from toonies, quarters from dimes. She must have been in her late 70s, wearing a coat that had seen too many winters, and a toque that had faded from what was probably once a vibrant blue to something closer to gray. "I'm sorry," she was saying to the young cashier. A kid with kind eyes who couldn't have been more than 19. "I thought I had enough, but I miscounted. Let me put the butter back." Her basket held the basics. A small bag of rice, some carrots, chicken thighs on sale, and the butter she was now trying to return. Maybe $40 worth of food total. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was remembering how Catherine used to insist we help people when we could. Maybe it was just that the woman reminded me of my own mother in her final years, proud and independent but struggling. "I'll cover it," I said, stepping forward. The woman turned to me, her eyes sharp despite her age. Very sharp, unnervingly so. "You don't need to do that." "I know I don't need to, but I'd like to, if you'll allow me." She studied my face for a long moment, longer than seemed normal for such a simple exchange. Then she nodded slowly. "That's very kind of you. Very kind indeed, Mr. Bennett. Thomas Bennett. But please, call me Tom." "Margaret," she said simply. I paid for both our groceries. Hers came to $37.42. The cashier bagged them separately, and I helped Margaret carry hers to the front of the store. That's when it happened. As we stood near the exit, watching the gray drizzle streak the windows, Margaret turned to me with those sharp eyes and said, "You have a son, don't you, Tom?" I was surprised. "Yes, Daniel, though I haven't seen him in quite some time." 3 years, 2 months, she said. It wasn't a question. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "How did you—" "When he comes back," she interrupted, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And he will come back soon. Don't let him touch the garden. No matter what he says, no matter how much sense it makes. Don't let him anywhere near your garden in the back." I laughed nervously. "I'm sorry?" "Your garden, Tom. The one behind your house with the stone path and the maple tree your wife planted. When Daniel comes home, he'll offer to clean it up for winter. He'll insist on it. Don't let him." My laugh died in my throat. I'd never told her Catherine's name. I'd never mentioned the maple tree. "How do you know about—" "Promise me," she said urgently, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Promise me you won't let him in that garden." I promise." She released my arm and smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Good, very good. Kindness should always be repaid, Tom. Remember that." And then she walked out into the rain, her grocery bag clutched to her chest, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for someone who'd been counting change so carefully just minutes before. I stood there, watching her disappear around the corner, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. The rational part of my mind, the mathematics teacher who dealt in proofs and logic, said this was just a strange encounter with an eccentric old woman. Maybe she'd seen me around the neighborhood. Maybe she'd heard neighborhood gossip about my estranged son. Toronto could feel like a small town sometimes, especially in established communities like Bloordale Village. But the part of me that Catherine had always called my intuition, the part I usually ignored in favor of facts and figures, was screaming that something was very wrong. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets. My house was a modest, 2-story Victorian just off Bloor, the kind that had been built in the 1000. 920 seconds, and renovated badly in the 1,970 seconds before I bought it in 1994, and spent years returning it to something resembling its original character. The garden Margaret had mentioned was my pride and joy, or had been, before Catherine died. She'd been the gardener, really. I just maintained it now, keeping the plants alive more out of obligation to her memory than any real passion. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the house. Everything appeared normal. The porch light I always left on was glowing warmly. The recycling bins I'd put out that morning were still by the curb, waiting for tomorrow's pickup. The neighbor's cat, an orange tabby named Pumpkin, was sitting on my front steps, as usual. Normal. Everything was normal. So why did my hands shake as I turned off the ignition? That evening, I tried to put the encounter out of my mind. I made dinner pasta with the marinara sauce I'd learned to make from Catherine's recipe, though mine never tasted quite right. I read 50 pages of the John le Carré novel I'd been working through. I checked my email, answered a message from my chess partner about our Thursday game, deleted the usual spam. But I kept thinking about Margaret's words, about Daniel. My son and I had what therapists would call a complicated relationship. He'd always been difficult, not in a rebellious teenager way, but in a deeper, more troubling sense. Even as a child, he'd had a way of manipulating situations to his advantage. Small lies that built into bigger ones. Charm that masked something calculating underneath. Catherine had seen it too, though she'd tried to be hopeful. "He's just trying to find his way," she'd say. "He'll grow out of it." He never did. By the time he was 30, Daniel had burned through 3 careers, 2 marriages, and more money than I wanted to calculate. He'd ask for loans that were never repaid, make promises that were never kept, show up with schemes and opportunities that always ended with him needing more money, more help, more second chances. 3 years and 2 months ago, how had Margaret known the exact time frame? I'd finally said no. He'd wanted to invest $50,000 in a cryptocurrency venture that sounded, to my old-fashioned ears, like an obvious scam. When I refused, he'd gotten angry, said I'd never believed in him, never supported him, never loved him the way I should. I told him that love didn't mean funding poor decisions, that I'd given him every opportunity, every chance, every benefit of doubt I could muster. He left that night and I hadn't heard from him since. Not for Catherine's funeral 18 months ago, not for my birthday, not even a Christmas card. Part of me had been relieved, and now this strange woman was telling me he'd be coming back, and I needed to keep him away from the garden. I stood at the back window, looking out at that garden. Even in November's dying light, I could make out the stone path Catherine and I had laid together the summer after we bought the house. The raised beds where she'd grown tomatoes and peppers. The maple tree she'd planted when Daniel was born, now 37 years old and strong. What could possibly be dangerous about the garden? I went to bed uneasy, triple-checking the locks on all the doors, something I never did, and lying awake far longer than usual. The knock came the next morning. I was having coffee, reading the Globe and Mail on my tablet, when someone rapped on the front door. 3 sharp knocks, confident and familiar. Through the peephole, I saw him. Daniel looked older. His hair had started to gray at the temples, and he'd grown a beard that didn't quite suit his face. But it was unmistakably my son, standing on my porch with a duffel bag at his feet and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Every instinct told me not to open the door. Margaret's warning echoed in my mind, but he was my son, and despite everything, despite the years of disappointment and frustration, there was still a part of me, probably the part Catherine would have encouraged, that hoped he'd changed. I opened the door. "Dad," he said, and his smile widened. "I know it's been a long time, too long. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Daniel, can I come in? I've been traveling all night. Took the bus from Vancouver. I needed to see you, needed to apologize properly." I hesitated just a moment too long, and something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Anger? It was gone before I could be sure. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He picked up his bag and walked past me into the house. I noticed he'd lost weight. There was a gauntness to him that worried the father in me, even as the rest of me remained cautious. "Coffee?" I offered. "That would be great." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd had so many difficult conversations over the years. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug I gave him and looked around the room with what seemed like genuine nostalgia. "God, nothing's changed. he said. It's like stepping back in time. Some things have changed. Your mother's not here. His face fell. I know. I'm sorry I didn't make it to the funeral. I was in a bad place then. Not an excuse, just an explanation. What brings you back now? He took a long sip of coffee. I've been doing a lot of work on myself. Therapy. Really looking at my patterns and behaviors. And I realized I've hurt a lot of people, Dad. Especially you and Mom. I wanted to come home and try to make amends. It sounded rehearsed. But then again, therapy often did make people sound rehearsed. Maybe that was unfair of me. Where are you staying? I was hoping, and I know I have no right to ask. But could I stay here for a few days? Just until I get on my feet. I have some job interviews lined up. I'm being smart this time, Dad. Practical. Taking real jobs. Not chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Despite my reservations, I found myself nodding. The guest room is still made up. His relief seemed genuine. Thank you. Really. Thank you. The first day passed uneventfully. Daniel unpacked his meager belongings, took a long shower, and we had a quiet dinner together. He asked about my retirement, about my chess games, about the neighbors. Normal conversation. Pleasant, even. I almost forgot about Margaret's warning. Almost. The next morning, I woke to find Daniel already up, standing at the back door and looking out at the garden. That maple tree is huge now, he said when he noticed me. I remember when Mom planted it. I must have been, 7 or 8? You were born that spring. She planted it the day we brought you home from the hospital. He smiled, but there was something off about it. The garden's a mess, though. All those leaves, the dead plants. Let me clean it up for you. It's the least I can do. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. Don't let him anywhere near your garden. That's all right, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. I have a landscaper coming next week. A landscaper? Dad, that's a waste of money. I can do it this afternoon. I want to help. Really, Daniel. It's fine. Come on, let me do this. It would make me feel useful. There was an edge to his voice now, a subtle pressure that I recognized from years of similar conversations. The way he'd slowly ramp up the insistence until you found yourself agreeing just to avoid conflict. No, I said firmly. I appreciate the offer, but no. His jaw tightened. Why not? Because I said no. We stared at each other across the kitchen, and in that moment, I saw something in his eyes that chilled me. Something cold and calculating. Then he smiled, and it was gone. Okay, Dad, whatever you want. I just thought I could help. But for the rest of the day, I noticed him looking at the garden, staring at it through windows, finding excuses to stand by the back door. That evening, he brought it up again at dinner. I was thinking, he said, pushing his food around his plate. Maybe I could at least rake the leaves? Just make it look a bit tidier? Daniel, I already told you. I know, but it's really bothering me. Seeing Mom's garden like that. She'd hate it. The mention of Catherine made me angry in a way I wasn't quite expecting. Don't use your mother to manipulate me. She taught you better than that. He set down his fork. I'm not manipulating you. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to show you I've changed, and you won't even let me do something as simple as yard work. How am I supposed to prove myself if you won't give me a chance? Why is it so important that you clean up that specific area? It's not specific. It's just obvious. The garden is a mess. I'm offering to help, and you're acting like I'm asking to rob a bank. His voice had risen, his face flushed with anger. The old Daniel, the one I knew too well, was showing through the reformed facade. Lower your voice, I said quietly. He took a breath, visibly forcing himself to calm down. Sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have raised my voice. It's just, never mind. Forget I mentioned it. But he didn't forget. Over the next 2 days, he mentioned the garden at least a dozen more times. Different approaches, different tactics. Sometimes helpful, sometimes guilty, sometimes angry. He offered to do it as payment for staying with me. He suggested we do it together as a bonding activity. He even tried claiming he'd promised Catherine before she died that he'd maintain the garden, which was an obvious lie since he hadn't seen her in the last 3 years of her life. Each time, I refused. And each time, that cold thing in his eyes grew a little colder. On the 4th morning, I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of the back door opening. I got out of bed quickly, my heart racing, and moved to the stairs. From the landing, I could see through the kitchen to the back door. It was ajar, and through it I could see a figure in the garden, illuminated by the motion sensor light Catherine had insisted we install years ago. Daniel. He was digging near the base of the maple tree, working quickly with a small shovel I recognized from the garage. His movements were frantic, urgent. I should have confronted him right then. But something instinct, fear, I don't know what made me retreat to my bedroom instead. I locked the door, my hands shaking, and called 911. This is going to sound strange, I told the dispatcher, but my son is digging in my garden at 3 in the morning, and an old woman warned me not to let him near it, and I think something is very wrong. To her credit, the dispatcher didn't laugh. She asked if I felt threatened, if there were weapons involved, if I could get to a safe place. She kept me on the line while she sent a patrol car. Through my bedroom window, which overlooked the garden from the side, I watched Daniel dig. He'd excavated a hole about 2 feet deep when he stopped suddenly, his posture changing from frantic to rigid. He'd found something. I couldn't see what it was from my angle, but he pulled something out of the hole and held it up to examine it in the dim light. A bag of some kind. Dark plastic, the kind you'd use for garbage. His shoulders slumped. Whatever he'd expected to find, this wasn't it. That's when I saw them. There, at the edge of the garden where it met the alley fence, partially hidden by the bare hydrangea bushes' footprints. In the light November snow we'd gotten the day before, there were footprints that didn't belong to Daniel or me. Large, leading to the fence and back. My blood ran cold. Someone else had been in my garden. Recently. The police arrived 7 minutes later. I heard the doorbell, then heavy knocking, then finally Daniel's voice saying, "Okay, okay, I'm coming." I unlocked my bedroom door and went downstairs. 2 officers stood in my living room, a tall Sikh man who introduced himself as Constable Singh, and a woman with short blonde hair, Constable Davies. Daniel stood between them, dirt on his hands and knees, looking furious. "Dad, what the hell? You called the cops on me?" "Sir," Constable Singh said to me, "can you tell us what's going on?" I explained as best I could, the strange warning from Margaret. Daniel's obsession with the garden, waking up to find him digging at 3 in the morning. "It's my mother's tree," Daniel said. "I couldn't sleep, and I just thought I'd do something nice. Dad's been acting paranoid since I got here." "At 3 in the morning?" Constable Davies asked skeptically. "I have insomnia. I thought I'd be productive instead of just lying in bed." "What's in the bag?" I asked. Daniel's face went carefully blank. "What bag?" "The one you pulled out of the hole." "I don't know what you're talking about." Constable Singh looked at me. "Did you see him with a bag, sir?" "Yes. From my bedroom window. He took something out of the hole." "There's nothing," Daniel insisted. "He's confused. He's 64. He probably imagined it." Constable Davies had moved to the back door and was looking out at the garden with a flashlight. "There's definitely been digging here. Fresh. And Sir Constable Singh, you should see this." We all moved to the back door. Constable Davies was illuminating the footprints I'd seen earlier. "Those aren't mine," Daniel said quickly. "Those must be from before I got here." "They're in yesterday's snow," Constable Singh noted. "Sir, have you had anyone else in your garden?" "No, just Daniel and me, no one else." "And those aren't your footprints?" "No. Mine are smaller. And I haven't been out there." Constable Davies was methodically searching the area near where Daniel had been digging. "Found it," she called out. She emerged with the bag I'd seen. Dark green plastic, tied at the top. She opened it carefully, and even from the doorway, I could see what was inside. Cash. Stacks of it, bound with elastic bands. "Daniel Bennett," Constable Singh said, his voice taking on a formal tone. "I'm going to need you to tell me what you know about this money." "Nothing. I've never seen it before." "Really? Because according to your father, we just watched you dig it up." "He's mistaken. I wasn't. I was just clearing leaves. And I happened to find it. At 3 in the morning." "Yes." Constable Davies had been examining the bills. "These are marked," she said. "Evidence tags. These are from the Scotiabank robbery in Richmond Hill, 3 months ago." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible," Daniel said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Mr. Bennett," Constable Singh said to me, "I think you should come with us to the station." "You too," he added to Daniel. What followed were the longest 6 hours of my life. I sat in an interview room at 52 Division, drinking terrible coffee and telling my story over and over. First to Constable Singh, then to a detective named Investigator Patel, then to Investigator Patel again with her partner, Detective Morrison. They were kind but thorough. They wanted to know everything about Daniel's visit, about Margaret's warning, about why I hadn't let him in the garden. "You understand this looks peculiar," Investigator Patel said. "An old woman you'd never met before tells you something specific about your son and your garden, and then exactly what she predicted comes true. I know how it sounds. We'd like to speak with her." "This Margaret, do you have her contact information?" "No, I don't even know her last name. Can you describe her?" I did, in as much detail as I could remember. Late 70s, faded blue toque, gray coat, sharp eyes. They wrote it all down, but I could see the skepticism on their faces. "Mr. Bennett," Detective Morrison said gently, "did your son perhaps tell you about the money, maybe when he first arrived? And this story about the old woman is a way to— To what? To protect him? Why would I call the police then? Sometimes family dynamics are complicated. My son and I barely speak. We haven't had a real relationship in years. If he told me he'd buried robbery money in my garden, I would have called you immediately." They exchanged glances. "Here's what we know," Investigator Patel said. 3 months ago, 3 men robbed the Scotiabank on Yonge Street in Richmond Hill. They got away with $240,000. We've arrested 2 of the 3 suspects. Both have refused to say who the third man was, or where the money was hidden. You're telling us it was hidden in your garden, and your son knew about it. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you what happened. The thing is, Detective Morrison continued, we've been watching your house for the past 2 weeks. I stared at him. What? We had intelligence that someone would try to retrieve the stolen money soon. We've had an unmarked car on your street, watching. We saw your son arrive 3 days ago. We've been monitoring his movements. Then you know I'm telling the truth. We know someone dug up money in your garden at 3 in the morning. What we don't know is how much you knew about it beforehand. Nothing. I knew nothing. Then explained the old woman. I can't. I bought her groceries. She warned me about my son in the garden, and that's all I know. We went in circles for another hour before they finally let me go home. Daniel, they said, was being held for questioning. They'd let me know if they needed anything else. I took an Uber back to my house. They'd kept my car as potential evidence, and arrived just after noon. The garden was cordoned off with yellow police tape, and I could see officers still working back there, taking photographs and measurements. I went inside, made myself tea with shaking hands, and sat at the kitchen table, trying to process everything. My son had been involved in a robbery. He'd been part of a crew that had stolen $250,000, and he'd buried his share in my garden, in the garden his mother had loved, beneath the tree she'd planted the day he was born. The betrayal of it was overwhelming. But underneath that betrayal was something else. Confusion. How had Margaret known? How had she known Daniel would come back? How had she known about the garden? I didn't have answers, and I was beginning to think I never would. 3 days later, Detective Morrison called me. We've charged your son, she said. He's confessed to being the third man in the robbery. Claims he didn't want to do it but was coerced by the other 2. We'll let the courts sort that out. What happens now? He'll be arraigned, probably held until trial. Mr. Bennett, I want you to know we believe your story. We've reviewed the surveillance footage from the metro where you met the woman. We see you talking to her, carrying her groceries, standing together by the entrance. We haven't been able to identify her yet, but we're working on it. Thank you. There is one more thing. The footprints in your garden, the ones that weren't yours or your son's. We've identified them. My heart quickened. And they belong to Marcus Reeves, one of the other men arrested for the robbery. He was wearing an ankle monitor as a condition of his bail, and the data shows he was in your alley the night before your son arrived. We think he came to check on the money, saw it was still there, and left. So Daniel wasn't working alone. No, we think Reeves was supposed to be the one to retrieve the money, but Daniel got impatient, or scared. Hard to say. What about the old woman, Margaret? There was a pause. We're still looking into that. The footage is grainy, and she kept her face turned away from the security cameras, almost like she knew where they were. We're going through social services records, senior centers, homeless shelters. If she's in the system, we'll find her. But they never did. I looked for her too. I went back to that metro every day for 2 weeks, at different times, hoping to see her. I asked the staff if they remembered her. Some did. Oh yes, the lady you helped. but no one knew her name, or had seen her before or since. It was like she'd appeared just long enough to warn me, and then vanished. Daniel was convicted 6 months later. The judge gave him 8 years, calling his betrayal of his family's trust particularly egregious. I didn't attend the sentencing. By then, I'd accepted that the son I'd hoped he might become was never going to exist. The son who actually existed was someone I didn't know and didn't particularly want to. I sold the house that summer. Too many memories, too much pain. I moved to a condo in North York, something modern and anonymous with no garden to maintain and no history to haunt me. But before I left, I did one thing. I went to the maple tree Catherine had planted 37 years earlier, and I touched its bark, rough and solid under my palm. "Thank you," I whispered. I wasn't sure if I was talking to Catherine, or to the tree, or to Margaret, or to whatever forces in the universe had conspired to save my life. Maybe all of them. I'm 65 now. I still play chess at a community center, though a different one. I still read my John le Carré novels. I still drink ginger tea. And I still think about Margaret. Who was she? How did she know? Was she someone Daniel had mentioned his plans to? Someone who'd overheard them? An undercover officer, maybe. Though Detective Morrison swears no one in law enforcement had any contact with me before that night. Or was she something else? Something the rational, mathematical part of my brain doesn't want to consider? I don't have answers, but I have my life, which I very nearly lost because I couldn't imagine my own son would try to set me up to take the fall for a robbery or worse. Because that's what would have happened, isn't it? If I'd let him in that garden, if I'd let him clean it up, the police would have found the money, and Daniel would have claimed ignorance. Poor Dad must have hidden it there. Poor Dad must be losing his mind. Poor Dad must be involved somehow. And with his history with me, with the estrangement, with the years of asking for money and being refused, who would have believed the old man over the concerned son? I would be in prison right now instead of him. Here's what I've learned. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. When someone offers to help in a way that feels just a little too insistent, question why. And maybe most importantly, kindness matters. Not because it always comes back to you, not because the universe keeps score, but because we're all just trying to survive in this cold world. And sometimes a moment of grace is what saves a life. I still look for her sometimes. In crowds, in grocery stores, on street corners. I still imagine what I would say if I saw her again. Thank you. That's all. Just thank you. For the groceries, I gave her $37.42. In return, she gave me my life. Some debts can never truly be repaid. But I try. I buy coffee for people who are counting change. I pay for groceries when I see someone struggling. I offer kindness to strangers when I can. Not because I think an angel will save me again, but because maybe, somewhere, someone else needs saving. And maybe my $37.42 will buy them the warning they need to survive. That's how it works, I think. That's how we save each other. One small act of grace at a time.